Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume and ask permission to revise and extend my remark.
Without objection, it is so ordered, and the gentleman is recognized.
I thank the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I commend my colleague from Texas, Mr. Sessions, and Speaker Boehner, Leader Cantor, and the House leadership for bringing this important resolution forward. This resolution represents the opening battle in a fight against the continued expansion and overreach of the regulatory state, that state being the federal government. We have just gone through 4 years of a very liberal Congress and 2 years of a very liberal administration. And working hand to hand, they have passed massive new laws that expanded government and weakened personal freedom. The 10th Amendment says that all powers not specifically granted to the federal government are left to the states and the people. But from health care to financial services to other sectors of the economy, Congress has ceded its constitutional responsibility to unelected and unaccountable federal bureaucrats. 2 years ago, President Obama reminded us that elections matter when he said, "I won." Well, Mr. Speaker, in November, the American people won. In doing so, they made it clear to anyone listening that they strenuously objected to the direction that our country has taken. They object to the limitations imposed on our freedom, on our choices, on our ability to create jobs. This is not new. In the past, as well as in the current administration, liberal presidents who could not achieve their goals by the consent of the people have resorted to regulatory fiat to give their most extreme supporters what they want. Under these regulatory regimes, the power of Congress and the people has been reduced to notice and comment, a notice and comment period which they can only state their objections. However, it's becoming increasingly apparent to the American people these comments are regularly ignored by the regulators. The expansion of the regulatory state continues to concentrate power in the executive branch and to marginalize representative government, with congressionally enacted legislation being replaced by decrees from regulators who are insulated from the popular vote. Fortunately, this Congress is committed to doing something about unnecessary and unreasonable regulatory burdens. And the resolution we're debating today is a great start. Under this resolution, 10 House committees, including the Financial Services Committee, will review pending and existing regulations to determine their impact on our nation's economy, on its ability to create jobs, and most importantly, our own personal freedoms. This review comes not a moment too soon. Our job creators struggle under a seemingly endless and constant flurry of mandates pushed out by the administration and initiated under the formal majority in Congress. Nothing better illustrates the rule of the unelected in the regulatory state than the Dodd-Frank Act. As a result of this one massive piece of legislation passed in the last Congress, there will be a tsunami of 300 new Washington rules and regulations. The burden of these regulations will almost certainly limit access to credit for small businesses and consumers. They will divert private sector resources that should go to expanding businesses and creating jobs. And they will also limit the owners and the consumers of those firms from making their own choices and decisions. The Financial Services Committee has heard testimony from many witnesses about the harmful impact of the Act. One of them, the Cargill Corporation alone, told us that the Act's requirements on derivatives would cost the company $1 billion, funds that otherwise would be deployed for the construction of a new plant in Kansas City, a plant that would create thousands of jobs and put Americans back to work. That's only one example of the uncertainty our economy faces due to these new Washington regulations. It shows how the expanded regulatory state too often forces U.S. companies to divert resources and time away from job creation and investment, and instead towards obeying the ever-growing demands of a bigger and more intrusive government. In a hearing in my committee only this morning, there was bipartisan agreement and no opposition to a provision in our oversight plan offered by the gentleman, Mr. Westmoreland from Georgia, requiring a review of the mixed messages in which we hear Washington regulators calling for increased lending by banks, but examiners in the field micromanaging bank activities and stifling lending. These conflicting signals are creating uncertainty that prevent banks from lending to small businesses, and in extreme cases they have caused the failure of those very banks. This uncertainty in turn impedes economic growth and costs jobs. Let me conclude by saying this Congress was elected to limit the scope of the federal government, not to expand it. Our forefathers who fashioned the 10th Amendment would be pleased with our debate and our efforts today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I reserve the balance of my time.